So welcome to the testing panel. This panel is something that is kind of a staple in a lot of conventions. It's something that is super important for everyone to listen about people's testing journeys, their decisions to test, their decisions and choices not to test. There's a lot of complexity in all of it, and there's a lot of complexity in testing negative and positive. So we just thank you guys for being here so you can hear our stories, and hopefully this either sheds some light on your own journey, or it helps kind of give you a couple extra layers on, wow, okay, just because you test this way or that way, it can be a lot more complicated than one may think. So, but yeah, I'm Erika Boulavsky. I work for HD Reach, and yeah, that was a weird intro.
You did great, honestly.
I
was going to say all that, but you took it.
Weird transfer.
Yeah, I think where we wanted to start off, so we're each going to share our individual stories and how we came to those stories. But also, like, I just want to throw it out there just to meet expectations. Is there anything anyone in here wants us to try to answer or hit home when we talk about stories? Or are you just here to hear whatever we have to say? Anything?
Yes.
Yes. Just go for it. Just speak. Speak freely. Okay.
We're here to hear what you have to say.
Okay, that sounds good. We can do that. Well, we each have our own individual stories, and then I think what's most important and kind of the message I'll always leave with is testing is just a wildly individual decision. For every single person, everyone has a different situation with, how they learned about HD, who's got HD in their family, the environmental factors around them. So it's not a decision that we have any power to say this is how you should test and this is when you should test and this is anything about your testing experience is your decision and your decision to make. So I'm going to share my story first, and I think I'm passing to Erika, and then I'm cool. Passing to Hailey. And so I'm going to start a little bit about just my personal situation, and I'll talk a little bit about HD genetics, but to set the stage for how I ended up making my decision, my mom tested when I was about 8 years old. This was back in the 90s, and the difference, I would say, my parents made a decision whether they knew what they were doing or they didn't know what they were doing, is they told my sister and I, who were 8 and 9, pretty much the next day. So they didn't think about it. They didn't think of the repercussions of how this is going to impact my child, and maybe let's wait till tomorrow. They just ripped the Band-Aid off and told us. And in a little bit of what we heard some panelists today, they didn't get into like HD is a neurodegenerative brain disorder and all this stuff. Like, I'm 8 years old. They told me, mom has this thing called Huntington's and she might get sick one day, but if you have any questions, we're here to answer them, and we love you. And I heard it. Probably 20 seconds later, I was out in the yard playing again like it was a normal day. However, that was an important factor because that was kind of like my door opening for understanding that HD is in my life. And then I think the other decision that my parents made, whether good or bad, is they started getting involved. So they took my sister and I to events like this. I grew up in the Twin Cities. We started hosting our own fundraisers, and HD just kind of became part of my life. It became a normal part of my life. It became part of my friends' lives. They saw my mom from where she was to where she got to be, and HD kind of became a normal part of who BJ was, who my mom Debbie was, and understood it. I thought I always wanted to test when I got to be 18. I thought I wanted to know, and I'll talk about wanting to know versus needing to know. But I think once I got to 18 and I had that decision, like, I didn't really need to know. Like, I needed to just go to college and I needed to just live my life. And that wanting to know just kind of disappeared. Although post-college, I uniquely, my first job out of college was I was at a conference like this, and I met this company called Lundbeck. And Lundbeck sold a medicine for chorea with Huntington's called tetrabenazine or xenazine. So one of my first jobs out of college was actually working for this company. So I was doing a bunch of personal advocacy stuff in Huntington's, still raising money and getting involved in the NYA and helping start HDO, but now professionally, my 9 to 5 was Huntington's. So it was on my brain all the time. And I got to the point where I started to think about myself a lot. And I started to think about what is my future going to be like. And I think, having HD so much in my brain on a daily basis, like, I changed my I want to know versus I just need to know, because it's bugging me. It's killing me. And every day I'm anxious about what this answer might be. So now's the time to figure that out. So I decided to test. I was 23 years old. I was very, knew a lot of the centers of excellence around and how to get tested. But I also, what I came to conclusion personally was I wanted to know, I needed to know, but I didn't want my family to know. So I found a route to get tested that was kind of through a local neurologist. I lived in Chicago at the time, and they found a way to do anonymous testing for myself. So I used a fake name. I still remember going to that clinic one day. I drew blood, and kind of this smaller nonprofit who helped me do that just kind of assisted me through the process. I didn't have any counseling. I didn't have any education. I do feel like, my 12 years of being in the community, I felt like I knew it all. I felt like I was counseled and supported, but I probably could have used a lot more to understand what those results were. I also kind of made that decision to test, and I think of it and describe it to many people as there was different paths, and there's a path if you go right, and there's a path if you go left. And path if you go right is life with HD. And life with HD might look different than the path without HD. And things might be different based on kids and marriage and your career and how you live your life. They might be different based on which path you're in. But I thought of that quite a bit, and I came to the decision that I'm okay with either one of those paths. And when I was finally emotionally and psychologically okay, then I realized, you know what? I'm ready to test, because nobody wants to get an HD positive diagnosis, right? That's not the ideal situation. But if you're okay potentially going down that path, then you're okay to likely move forward with testing. I ended up testing negative. I have an intermediate allele, which means I'm kind of in the gray area, but on the very, very low side. So I got that news, and it hit me uniquely. I didn't jump up and have a party. I didn't call all my friends and family. It still hit me in a unique way. Being in this HD community, I had a lot of friends who tested positive. I had a lot of friends who were dealing with Huntington's. So I kind of took it, it's still in a positive manner, but it wasn't like, hey, let's have a party and let's cheer for this news. I ended up having discussions with my dad and with my sister many months down the line to tell them that news. But it was still even hard to tell people, because you're like, what is their reaction going to be? Are they going to be as excited as I think they might be? And it was an emotionally tough thing to do in that situation. And I think the biggest thing that testing in that area provided was a little bit of this guilt, right? I don't have a future with HD, and these people in my life do. But I think I just used that as motivation. And a little bit of that was to start this company, HD Genetics. I was involved with the Huntington's Disease Youth Organization, and we kept hearing from young people like, I need help testing, I can't get a genetic counselor. And I realized there was just a bigger problem with the routes to get tested. You could either test at a center of excellence, which was a little cumbersome, but still really good support, or you could go to your family care physician, which was very, very easy, but it was risky because they don't really do that very often. And I said, we just need we need an alternative option for people. So I kind of looked in the mirror and said, no one's going to do this other than the guy looking back in the mirror. So that's really where we try to take the model of a center of excellence, which wraps their arms around people when they're testing to make sure they're supported and educated, and combine it with the general practitioner who can test you, which is just a little easier, right? It's a little simpler, it's a little faster, it's a little cheaper, and combine that into a service that could reach, hopefully, whoever needed it around the country. So we've hired a full-time genetic counselor whose name's Wes, and he works with all people who decide to test. And we have a similar framework than how I talked about to try to help people feel supported and feel educated while never pressuring them to test and never pressuring them to not test. It's always led by the individual who's going through that process. And that kind of leads me to today. But again, I'll say it as my decisions and my path is wildly unique to anybody else. And, that was my decision. And, everyone has their own right to make that choice. So I'll pass it over to Erika.
I always love hearing BJ talk. He's like, when I was like, you're going to be here, he's like, oh, nobody wants to hear my story. I'm like, everybody wants to hear your story. So, but I am there's very similar, I always love it because like there's very similar paths within our stories with some things, right? And everybody's so individual with their own stories. So with myself, it started with my grandmother. She was symptomatic. She was symptomatic since I was born. I had always known that this is something with my grandmother that was different. And she continued to get sick over time, and eventually we were able to finally have a name called Huntington's disease, right? And so this was a known thing. I had no idea as a child that this was genetic. I didn't really know anything about it. I just knew, man, my grandma acts different, and I'm going to kind of be her advocate because why not? And I, like, as a kid, I was like, I'm going to use my imagination. I thought it was so cool that, like, she could speak a language that, like, nobody else understood, but I understood. And I was like, I could speak grandma's language. And I thought I was the coolest thing ever. And I think that just shows the mind of a child, right? Like, when we have things that we're trying to figure out or understand, like, sometimes we're just, like, children are curious, and that's why children are just amazing, but they're strong, and they create things in their mind that can also be really incredible. And so that's still, no matter the ups and downs with my grandmother's behaviors or how what happened in the future, that was still like such a massive memory that I hold on to. And I'm still like, my grandmother was one of my favorite people. She was wild. Now that I look back as an adult, I'm like, man, grandma had a lot of stuff that I'm finding out as I got older. But as a kid, I was like, no, she's my favorite. And eventually my mom decided to get tested, and she tested gene positive. I was still in elementary school, so I was still young, and they felt, my parents said, we have no secrets. We have no secrets from our kid. And I have two other sisters, but they chose me as like being the oldest and felt like they needed to tell one of us. And so, but when they told me that it was a secret, we had to keep it inside. And if I wanted to tell anybody, I could talk to my dad's parents, my other grandparents. And I just remember, but like that was it. My parents didn't really have a lot of other supports at the time, right? To know how to, I told them, and I was honest, and I said if they need anything, they can come to me, but they didn't have the resources and the tools to continue that support because they were also grieving and figuring out my mom's diagnosis and what that meant for us as a family. But I remember her telling me, and I remember that experience and realizing, oh, wow, this is something that is going to also affect my mom, who talks perfectly fine, who's completely healthy, who runs, who does all these things. Apparently, she's supposed to look like my grandmother eventually, which was shocking. So I remember writing a little letter to my grandparents, and then I like put it in the desk drawer and like never sent it. And my parents found it and was like, do you want to talk? And I'm like, absolutely not. And just like shut down. And then it became a little bit of this, as your family, so that's where we kind of, like as your family really dove in, my family was like, we have to protect ourselves. It's a genetic illness. We don't know what that means for my dad. Even like they even said, I don't know, maybe we have to get a divorce eventually. Like, I don't know, like with all of this stuff. And there's a lot of just being scared of what that meant. And as a child, I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know what all this means, but I know I'm supposed to protect my family. I'm supposed to be quiet about it. And so that was like drilled kind of in my brain as my mom started just needing more support for herself, like emotionally. She reached out to Dr. Mary Edmondson, who started HD Reach in 2009. So it's kind of an incredible full circle that I get to work for HD Reach. But she actually reached out, and I joke with Mary now where I was like, I remember sitting in your office. This was the first time, like she was like, yes, we're we're going to this because we need to learn more. And I told your sisters, and we're gonna go and talk to this psychiatrist. And I was like, this is wild. We're not supposed to talk about this. And I just remember sitting there like this. And then Dr. Mary was like, you seem angry. And I was like, how dare you call me out? Like, as a little 13-year-old or whatever, I was like, nobody calls me out on my anger, okay? I'm not angry, but I'm angry. But I just didn't have the words to describe it. I was angry. And I was angry that I had this secret. And so when I turned 18, I actually, it was like a rage in me of like, I'm just angry. I'm angry that this is in my life. I don't want to be a part of anything. I'm angry that this is even something I have to go through. So yeah, I'm going to like get tested because why not? And it was like an anger of like, as soon as I turn 18, I'm going to get tested. And then it was like, I was like 19. I was like, no, I'm going to get tested. And then it was like, oh yeah, I'm like 20. Like, I'm going to get tested. And then my mom was like, hey, you're like turning 21. And I think you've like been like a really good kid. And we're going to go to Vegas. Like, I'm going to like give you like this gift of us going to Vegas. And I was like so excited. She's like, but it's also like an HDS, like a convention for Huntington's disease. And I was like, what? I was like, this is supposed to be like fun, and this is not going to be fun. Like in my mind as a 21-year-old, but then I get to go, and it still was not my right time. Like, it was not. I went to maybe one session. I saw BJ up there with Seth, all these other people. They were starting out H2YO. Like, they had all the shirts and was looking cool. And I was like, all right, I'm out. I was like, wait, everybody's introducing themselves. I'm going to the pool. Like, I was like, but getting to see that, like, that they were like creating this space was like in the back of my mind, like, oh my gosh, this is something cool. But I was still not ready. And we ended up having a house fire, and I went to a therapist and was like, hey, I need to talk about like these nightmares from this fire. And she eventually kind of was like, I think we need to talk about Huntington's disease. And I was like, no, we don't talk about Huntington's. That's wild. I'm talking about this like trauma that I experienced, and you want to talk about something completely different. And she's like, but I think we should talk about it. I was like, what a way to turn that on me. But that was so incredible because like it was finally somebody that I could talk to, that I could kind of open up to a little bit. And I started choosing my way into social work, but the years start going by, and I'm still like, I'm just not ready to test. And then I get into hospice, so I become a hospice social worker, and I'm like, man, there's all of these things that you need to have in place, which is fine, right? I'm like, before testing, I'm like, I want to have the right things in place because I'm seeing this and what this happens at end of life for others. And, but before that, so I guess back up really quick is I was like, I think I can dip my toe into HD, right? So, we talked to Dr. Mary again, and she, connected me with Chandler Swope with H2YO. And Chandler was like, yeah, you're in school for social work. Like, come on, H2YO camp. Like, I'll take you on as a volunteer. And I'm like, cool. Like, I don't talk about my story, but like, I guess I have to. But that was like, I was like, I think I need to put myself in an uncomfortable position to open up and change the way I was processing and taking in things. And then H2YO became H2YO camp became, oh God, wow, that came out of nowhere. Damn, BJ. H2YO camp became one of the best things that I ever did. And it completely changed my trajectory and like telling my story. And now, I mean, I've been to every H2YO camp since, and now I'm a counselor for that, which is just incredible. But it really helped me get connected. And this is a full circle moment as well. I have so many full circle moments. But this panel, so I did it at HGSA NYA but during their convention about 9 years ago. And I met my now wife in the community, but she actually trained me and a couple other people to do this panel. So that was the person that I met is also in the community. She's G negative. So we have HD on both sides. But HD gave me this incredible life of love and this amazing life of friends that I get to look up to. And so through that, I continue to be in this community, and now I work professionally in it, which is amazing. But it's one of those things which is funky because as much as I'm in HD, I still don't have this desire to really go left or right yet, right? I still don't have this eating desire to know. And I think there's also this idea of I'm not ready to kind of deal with that grief of what that looks like. Because being at risk right now for so long has been an identity. And once you make that choice, you're going to be on a new journey for a new identity. And because like BJ said, like testing negative, like we have a lot of friends who are very involved, but a lot of people are gene positive. We're seeing a lot of people. We know a lot of people. And as a gene negative person, you're going to be living through a lot of that. And you're going to be caregiving. You're going to be surrounded by people you love that you're fighting for. And as a gene positive person, you're also dealing with that result. So for me, I'm like, well, I can just sit in this unknown and be okay with it for now. Now I'm getting older, right? I'm like 10 years away from when my mom started getting sick. So I'm not saying that like I want to get tested right now, but as I get older, I think for me, it's a responsibility to go like checking in, right? Checking with my wife, the people around me, am I still doing well? Do I still feel good? Am I taking care of myself? And I think that's my responsibility to know, like if I have people go, oh man, there's something we need to talk about. There's some changes that we're experiencing. For me, I'm gonna be connecting to my support system. I'm gonna be connecting to getting tested and choosing that for myself. But for right now, I think it doesn't bother me day to day to live like this. And so I think that's important for everyone to also know, like for yourself, your journey is going to be very different, but it's okay to wait. It's okay to test. It's okay to do what's best for you. Family planning is something that's really important for a lot of people. For me, I've never been like, I need to have a biological child. That's never been my, like, I love children. I have godkids. Like, I love them all. But for me, that's not something I'm like, this is something I need. But for some people, it is. And that's something to think about. What does that look like? So with that being said, like, I hope everyone just learns to, like, get your education, but get plugged in. Talk to people who are in this community and really get a diverse view of what everyone's experiences are, and then take your own experience and go, okay, like, what is going to be the best route for me? And so for right now, the best route is still being at risk. It's my decision for right now. I think genetic testing is so incredibly important. I'm so proud of BJ and what he's done. We also do genetic testing at HD Reach. It's something that we partner with Dr. Bonnie and Dr. Bob Tressman on. But it's something that I'm so proud of people to go through if they feel like that is their choice. And then I'm also proud of you if you go, I'm not ready yet, but maybe one day I will. It's my buddy. And then we got this one.
If you don't know me, I'm Hailey. I come from an HD family, so I learned about HD when I was about 8 years old, I believe. My father was diagnosed with it. And so it was kind of the same thing as like BJ said, of like my parents were very like, this is Huntington's disease, you're going to see it, changes are going to start happening. And as I got older, I kind of really threw myself into the community. So we started going to support groups. I even went to the HD YO camp where I actually met these two many, many years ago. And so at that camp, I actually remember people were talking about their testing journeys and things like that there. And so it was interesting to hear people's perspectives of it, because obviously from the age of 8 to your teens, I wasn't thinking about it a lot. I looked at all the things, was very, I struggled a lot with the fact that like that there's no cure for it, and that I was at risk for it, so I struggled a lot like mentally with it at that age. And so that camp was really nice because I got to connect with other people my age and kind of realize like I'm not alone in this. There's so many other people out there going through this same thing. And so when once I finished high school, I didn't think about it a lot. I kind of moved off to college, and I was kind of in I'm going to do college, finish college, and then we'll think back on it. So I kind of distanced myself from the community at that time. And then I remember when COVID hit, I had lost my job, and so I was at home all the time. And I had gone back and forth about whether or not I wanted to get tested or not. And it was just many, many years of I would like think on it really hard and be like, that's something I want to do. And then I would be like, actually, I don't think about it ever. And so we won't worry about it. So I went through those periods all the time. And so when I was thinking about it really hard in COVID time, it was just kind of like, the only person I had known that had gotten tested anonymously was my older brother, and he had to go out of state to do it. And so it seemed like this big challenging thing to do, and it was like, oh, when am I going to get to have time to go do that? And then do I have to go more than once to do like counseling and then do the test and then find out my results? And it just seemed like a lot. So then many years later, I decided to get... I actually heard about HD genetics in 2023. And I found that very interesting because it was something that I could do at home. I didn't have to leave my house. I could do all the calls from my home, and it just felt very easy to do. And the reason that I kind of decided at that point that I was ready to get tested was because my husband and I, we were actually talking about like wedding or engaged and these kind of conversations, and I never felt any pressure from him to get tested. It was all pressure from myself, and it wasn't like I want to know. It was, you are going to be a burden to this person. Like, you're going to, if you're positive, they have this whole new thing that's going to come into their life, and they're going to have to learn how to live with it. Or you can get tested and they have a chance to step away. And I really thought to myself that if that person stepped away from me, I was going to hold no bad ill will their way. It was just something that I was going to understand and be like, I get it. I've seen it go through with my dad. I've seen the struggles. I get it. So I did decide to get tested. And when I did it, I didn't tell him that I was doing it. I just kind of like did it all online, talked to Wes. I would have the phone calls in my car when I got home. And all I had to do was like a swab. So the swab came to me in the mail. I swabbed my mouth and I sent it back. So I was able to do that without anyone having any idea. And then when it came time to find out my results, I was like, okay, I want to have somebody with me, because the way that I did it was just on the phone, just a FaceTime call. And so I had my mom and my older brother meet me at a library. Don't recommend a library for this kind of news. So we were in a library, trying to be quiet. And we get the unfortunate news that I had tested positive. So there was definitely a moment where Wes was like, do you need anything? And I was like, no. And so we just ended the call, and then my family just kind of sat for a minute and processed and shed some tears. And you don't want to do that in a library where you are supposed to be quiet, because we were very loud. So I got the news, and we all headed our separate ways, and it was like, okay, well, what do I do now? Now that I know this, like, first step for me was I wanted to tell my husband, because I was like, that was the main thing driving me, of like, I don't want to burden somebody. I want to give him a choice to get out of this if he wants to. And so it was like, okay, how do I tell him? So I actually talked to Wes and was like, how do I have this conversation with people in my life? Because I don't know how to navigate this. This is something that I lived with growing up, but this is something completely new to somebody else. And so I gave him that information. He took it, I think, as well as anybody could take it. Obviously, we got married, so he didn't back out of it yet. So having those conversations were just tough. And then just trying to figure out what my life looks like now, positive. So for me, I still live day by day, just like any normal day. I try not to think too hard about it. Which can be challenging, because my father did start showing symptoms in his early 30s. And so as I get closer to that age, I do feel like a fear of like, oh God, I can't stop time. That's going to get here any minute now. is what it feels like. And so just trying to prepare before I hit that age in case it hits me as early as it did my dad. But I'm very fortunate to have a really good support system in my family. So I have found it very challenging for myself to kind of research and find out what's going on in the HD community. So I've been able to lean on really heavily my family. So they'll keep their ears out for things. They go to support groups. They're really involved in HD Reach. And so they find out all of these kinds of wonderful things, and they bring the information back to me, and they'll share it with me in a way that's not overwhelming to myself. Because if I'm trying to read something and I get really into it, but then let's say something doesn't work out and I hear bad news of it, I just feel like it will be very, very challenging, or very hard to deal with if I have to face that each time. So having them kind of be able to sort through things and figure out what's worth sharing, what maybe is still needing a little more time to share, really, really helps. And then just having the community of I've been trying to get more involved and find out more about clinical trials and things. And that's really scary if you're just researching and looking out there, because I don't know how they work. I don't know how you sign up for them. And so having this community to be like, hey, here's my stuff. I would love to get involved for whatever I am qualified to do, or I am able to do. And then them reaching out to me saying, hey, this is something I think you would be good for, instead of me having to go out and do all that work, I think has been really, really helpful. So yeah, now I just live each day as it comes, and I try not to think too hard about it, which can be challenging, because I did the Enroll HD this year for the first time. And, going into it, I had those moments where I was like, well, the other day at work, I tripped and I fell and I twisted my leg, or I did this or that, or I dropped this thing. And it's hard not to get in your head about it. But when I did that, they were like, we don't see anything. And it's like, oh, that's great. I'm just clumsy. So it's just really neat to have all this support to help. And then, I thought, because I had challenged so hard mentally with my teen years in it, I thought that I would have that really bad mental period, which is why I wanted to wait till I got done with college to be able to be like, okay, I have my degree, I'm done with school, so if I get bad news, we might have time to process it and deal with it. But I've been very fortunate that I haven't really fallen into that again. I don't know what it is, but I've been able to have a pretty good positive attitude about it and just kind of keep on living.
Absolutely.
That's great. Appreciate you sharing.
Thank you. I feel like what you mentioned too about your testing journey being your decision was something that really stuck out to me, because I feel like I'm also in this boat of Melissa knows, my wife knows a lot about this community, so there's no pressure. But when it does come up, she goes, okay, I think about it. I think about what this could be in the future, and we acknowledge it, and then we go, okay, it's time to let it go. And we kind of move forward, but we talk about that. But there's never this, you need to get tested or XYZ, right? And I guess I would say that for those who are trying to decide about testing or whatever this is, make sure you surround yourself with people who are supportive and want to encourage you to do the best thing for you. And, it can be hard, right? Because sometimes it's this is a two-person thing, it's their life too, but also ultimately when it boils down, the choice to decide to test is up to you. And you should never kind of feel this intense pressure around you to make this choice if you're not ready. So I think that was such a great thing to bring up.
Any thoughts, questions, comments?
I'd like to make a comment, and a lot of people don't think about this, but I have one child on each end. One's negative, one's positive. And you mentioned grief. There's grief on both sides, whether you're positive or you're negative.
Yeah, I actually want to say something on that. I actually found it really interesting. So I mentioned how my brother got tested. I didn't know that he had gone and gotten his results until a year or two ago, maybe 2 years ago, I found out. And it was like, he had called me up one day because he had just gone to the conference overseas.
Oh, in Prague, HUIO Congress. In Prague.
Yes, he went to that, and he got to talk to people about testing and how you have these conversations about positive, negative, and stuff like that. And so when he came back, he seemed ready to have that conversation with me. And so he called me up one day, and he was like, I have my test results. I want to know if you want to know them. And I was like, sure. And he was like, do you need a minute to think about it? And I was like, no. I mean, I was like, if you want to tell me, great. If you want to keep them to yourself, that's fine too. Like, I don't mind. And so he told me that he had tested negative, and he wanted to give me a heads up because he was going to be speaking on, I believe, a testing panel. So he wanted me to know. And I was just like, okay, great. That's great. I'm so happy for you. Like, I am so thrilled that he got a negative result. Am I still upset that I got a positive one? Sure. But that's not his fault. It's nobody's fault. So trying not to be like, I tried to make him feel better of like, look, you didn't choose this. It wasn't one of us gets a pass and one of us doesn't. We both had the same kind of risk, and nothing you did affected my result. And so just trying to make sure that he knows that, like, I don't have any ill will towards him of that result. It's just luck of the draw. I wish we were both negative. That would have been the perfect scenario, but it's not the way the cards played out. And, so having those conversations I know can be tough because he held on to that information for a few years, I found out. He just wasn't sure how to tell me. And I was like, oh, I didn't realize that, because when I got my news, he was sitting right next to me. So I had no idea. So, yeah.
I think that's just the importance of talking with a really good genetic counselor. Sometimes you go into the testing process, think this is just about me. This is my decision. But a really good counselor helps you understand of like, how is this decision going to impact other people, which then in turn is going to impact you. So how is it going to impact, your sister or your parents or your friends or your employer or whomever it might be? It is a personal decision. However, there is, impact on yourself based on how it impacts other people, spouse, boyfriend, girlfriend, your kids, depending on the situation. And I think that was one of the things I noticed too, like, that even at centers of excellence, they have genetic counselors who are very well versed in Huntington's, but they still only spend, 10% of their time on HD. And I think that was the purpose too of bringing somebody on at HD Genetics is they're a super counselor. They spend 100% of their time on HD. They get to see, 20 times the cases and understand it, so they can really help people think through this as thoroughly as possible. But I think some people make this decision that they're able to handle it and they know it all, when in reality we get a lot of comments that are like, man, counseling sounded like I didn't need it. Like, that sounds like we're holding hands through the computer or we're holding hands in a center, but like, it's really just an educational conversation for you to think through how this will impact you.
Yeah, for sure. HD impacts a lot of, like, it's not just HD, right? Illness in general, or just like things in life, like things are going to impact you. It's going to impact your network. It's going to impact people in a lot of different ways. And learning how to communicate is one of the biggest superpowers to develop. And that doesn't always, like, we're not all like born to communicate like the way we want, right? Or to have some of these more intense conversations. Sometimes, like most of the time, right? We have to learn it. We have to learn from others, and we have to learn from somebody that supports us and helps us identify who do we need to be communicating with to keep building our like support network throughout this process, for sure.
You guys, you mentioned one part about like when your parents told you when you were very young. It's probably a little harder now because you've gone through your own decision around testing. You're in a very different place now. But have you ever thought about like how you think that time in your life like affected you, like how it played into who you are now, your personality, your just characteristics, your just things about you that maybe trace back to that experience of how you went and how you were informed by your parents, though this is a thing for through this, or you may think about this in the future, like any impact that you can sort of trace just in terms of who you are now? Because you alluded to repercussions, right?
I think so. I mean, I'd have to hypothesize a little bit of like, well, that is changed who I am today versus was I going to be this person regardless of that answer. But no, I think I'm less scared of life because you know what, my parents, they weren't scared. They told me the next day, you know, and I think you get so much from your parents. Like my parents came out and said like, we're going to deal with this and we're going to figure it out. And I think that's kind of how I deal with my own life and decisions versus I think, you know, if I had a parent who told me 20 years later and been like, you know what, we had a secret and we've been holding on to it for 15 years. You're like, whoa, like HD must be scarier than you're telling me because you were scared of it. And I look up to you as a parent and maybe there's, you know, I don't know. I think just being the transparent and let's fight this thing has kind of given me that same kind of characteristic.
Yeah, I agree. I for myself, I feel like it was not out of my parents, not, you know, there's tremendous love that went into it and they wanted to be honest. They just needed the tools to how to support us as children as we continued throughout the disease within our family. And so I think it's, you know, there's children that are raised in HD families and they're just the most incredible human beings on this planet. There's empathy like no other. There's patience like no other. They're, you know, these are, we don't wish this on anybody, but they're some of the most amazing humans. But I think transparency and honesty and education and the support that, you know, just kids being able to be, you know, show up to events like this or joining other groups to meet other kids, like being able to experience those things, I think help give kids the tools to better cope as they get older. And I agree, if this found me later on, I would probably be experiencing a lot of anger in my adulthood versus getting it out in my childhood. And now my anger just comes out in video games when I'm losing. You know, that's where I direct it now. But, you know, I had the time to process and I'm glad. And my parents too. My parents are incredible human beings, but they needed the time too. And I think as we all kind of learn all these resources in education, we now are developing the tools sooner and earlier to support these children and all these children that are growing up in HD families.
Yeah, I think it's a whole different topic of telling your kids, but like I've never heard, and all the people I've met at conferences and conventions, never heard, as far as I'm aware, anyone say, I wish my parents would have waited to tell me. I always hear, I wish my parents would have told me earlier, or like I kind of have some remorse towards my parents' decision. And I always say this to parents, and although every situation and kid is different, like I think the best day to tell your kid about HD was yesterday. But like any tough decision, like, I don't know, you make an excuse and you're like, I'll do it tomorrow. And even though that day is going to suck and the next day is going to suck, like it's just, sometimes you got to rip the Band-Aid off because kids are more resilient, you know, than we always give them credit for. And that's whether it's Huntington's or anything. But, you know, everyone has their own individual situation too.
For sure.
We had
Tom.
the worst case testing. My wife's mother was diagnosed with schizophrenia. They gave her electroshock in this Florida State Hospital. She was mentally ill. They treated her like she was mentally ill. And fast forward 30 years, and my wife has all these same motions and all this stuff. And we had to basically have a family intervention to get her tested. So basically she was tested against her will. Now she's probably 59 or 60 years old at this time. And when she got diagnosed, it came out of the blue like a sledgehammer on our family. And she was pissed. And she's blaming me for her, you know, getting her tested. So it was just not good. Yeah. It was not good at all. And now what were the options? We didn't know she had Huntington's disease. I thought that she might have MS or something like that. She's fallen and she had all these. Anyway, we had no idea her mother had Huntington's because they didn't have genetic testing back then. Yeah. They didn't know. So it was a terrible, terrible time for our family.
I hope we're past, like, I still hear those stories a lot. Like, we don't have any family history of HD. I'm like, well, let's talk through it, right? Well, grandma was in a hospital, so it's like, okay, there was probably something there. I'm hoping we're getting through that with technology and the internet, and but there's still some of these generational gaps that are happening. But it's tough. We see families that get their first diagnosis and they're like, well, now there's 47 of us who are at risk because of this one diagnosis that we had no idea about. Yep. And that's kind of a family bombshell that happens quite often.
Yeah, because then there's a bit of like playing catch up, right? You're trying to absorb things, but this is brand new information, and we have some people who might show up and go, yeah, like my mom just got diagnosed last week, and I'm here to test, and it's like, oh, okay. Let's talk through it, right? Let's talk through it. Let's like really make sure that, like, what, that's a lot to take on, like, at first, but also, do you have the correct education, like the information that you have about this disease? Like, what does that look like? And getting a bit deeper into that, but especially if somebody is symptomatic, right? And a lot of us, like, our experiences are like pre-symptomatic, right? So for those who are symptomatic, that is a very, like, because I know for us, like, if somebody's like, I'm experiencing symptoms or I'm concerned of certain things, we do refer to a clinic because we want them to get that clinic support versus like, okay, we can tell you have this mutation, but we can't diagnose you and say this is from this mutation. There's still, weirdly, with life, sometimes you can have HD and you have this like concern, and then there's like 20 other things that might want to trickle in and do different things to you, right? So there can be a layer of things to people's stories, but definitely somebody symptomatic history of misdiagnosis, it's a total bombshell, and it's playing catch up of grief, of its trauma, it's all this stuff piled in one that you're kind of processing in such a short amount of time.
Family member since then has tested, and they tested positive for the enhanced gene, and so but the cone of silence has fallen,
Mm.
and it is just not talked about.
Mm-hmm.
It's not mentioned. It's not acknowledged if you say anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
And there you go. They should have support, but that person doesn't want support.
Mm-hmm.
So pretty,
And sometimes we have to be the support when they're ready,
yeah.
right? It's soaking up, because I think a lot of us can probably speak on like having a family member who also experienced that. I know we do, and we're like very plugged in, and we can have people who are like, no, stay away from me. Like, I don't want to talk about it, I don't want to deal with it. So that's not something I bring up or talk about, but I will say I have a lot of resources. If you need it, I'm ready. If you need it, and then that's it. And then I back out. Thank you. But it's tough. It's tough to play this waiting game with some people, because they're not always going to dive in and soak up everything as possible. They might need the time, and sometimes we're on their timeline, but we can still be a resource for when they're ready. And just patience sometimes, and being present.
Hailey, thanks for sharing your story.
Thank you so much.
Erika, thanks for sharing your story.
Yeah.
There's nothing else. Oh yeah. Okay.
So I'm untested, and I feel like it takes up, maybe as I'm getting older, a lot more real estate than it did at first. Just day to day. So for you guys who have tested, did you find that it took up less real estate once you got your results eventually? Or did it continue to take up the same amount? If that makes sense.
Well, I guess with the positive result, obviously it's very much in my life. But I do think that the burden that I felt of like, I'm going to be a burden on these other people has gone away. So being able to get that result, have that discussion with the people in my life, give them the options of what they want to do, and then us come out still, with this information, still wanting to work as a team, be together. It just made it a lot easier to be like, okay, I have the information, I've given it to them, and so that burden that I felt on myself is gone, of like, I no longer feel like I'm gonna do this horrible thing to this person. They know what's coming, and so that's gone away, but it's definitely still something that, like, it's kind of like when I was thinking about getting tested, where I have these periods where I think about it a lot and like, what do I need to be doing? How do I get in these clinical trials and all these things? And then I go through periods of, oh, I'm not going to think about it. Like, I'm just going to live day to day, whatever I'm doing, and not be as involved in whatever communities I'm in, and just kind of take a step back. And so it kind of comes in these waves for me of like still getting into it, and then sometimes being like, I need a moment. If that kind of answers your question.
Yeah, I would say for me, it probably takes up more real estate, but it's different real estate. You know, because I do think, you know, I had this guilt. So it's like, what do you do now? And I think that's what spurred, you know, the creation of HDO, because I had tested, and then it was like, I got to do everything I can to show that I'm still one, right? It was that identity of like, I'm at risk and I might have this, to then I don't feel like I'm included, and I can't run away because then I'm being looked at as like a fake, a phony. So I actually think it took up more, because it became more of my personal mission to try to do something about it and to show, hey, I'm not trying to be a fake or phony. I wasn't in this community just because I was at risk. But again, it's different. I didn't have the anxiousness and the like psychological future struggles of like, what's my life going to be like? But it was definitely more of the like, what can I do now?
Thank you guys.
All right.
All right.
Well, thanks
you
everybody.
guys.
Appreciate the conversation.
Thank you.